Hello, and welcome to the Horror Survival Guide, where I, the laziest writer, teach you what to do in order to survive scenarios from the very best of horror fiction. And today we'll be sinking our teeth into how to hold out against the hordes of ravenous monsters on the islands of the Jurassic Park franchise. Whilst the series has never been as adult exclusive as the likes of other major players in the horror genre, it has most definitely delivered some truly terrifying moments through the use of its unstoppable beasts, who have managed to rack up quite the kill count in the 29 years since the prehistoric film franchise first reared its significant head. So, in the interest of safety, beware spoilers ahead for each of the 3 Jurassic Park films. Yeah, Jurassic World is going to get a whole video for itself, and let's take a look at how to escape from Dinotopia. Alright, so, Jurassic Park recap. This rich guy brings back dinosaurs, and they devour some folks. That's more or less it, and it's amazing. That said, you probably wouldn't enjoy your time there quite as much as I enjoy watching Rexy here.
Hear the roar!
And if you're on the island whilst watching this, then you might want me to get into the video before you get into that Ceratosaurus' stomach. Unfortunately for you, we're doing this in chronological order, and your advice probably won't arrive at a particularly convenient time, such as whilst you're still alive. Nonetheless, let's quickly look at rule number 1. Never work at Jurassic Park. By that, I don't mean sit around doing nothing like half the people in this film are at any given moment, but rather that you shouldn't take a job here, because despite the spared no expense line, John Hammond loves nothing more than underpaying his staff, which is not conducive to the kind of diet, lifestyle, and mental health support that you will more than likely need in order to live a long and happy life. Oh, also $4.25 an hour is really not worth going toe-to-toe with the titanic toad velociraptors who ultimately usurp the tyrant lizard king as the film's big bad. Joffrey finds that out the hard way. Luckily for you, the next couple of kills in the film are animals, giving you some time to get away whilst Rexy and the big one are chowing down on the pre-prepared living being buffet. Unluckily for you, a goat won't do much to sate the appetite of a rampaging 40-foot killing machine, so sooner or later you're going to end up facing off against this absolute unit. Now, you probably know the rule about staying still, and my advice for that is don't. These guys all move way more than the lawyer does, and he soon becomes Dino Chow, whilst they all survive. Also, it's entirely untrue that T-Rex vision was based upon movement, and the film shows that it knows this, because the beastie goes for things that aren't all that mobile, such as this jeep, and doesn't attack any of the trees swaying in the wind, or the bamboo that falls away to reveal Rexy's first human victim. Alan himself even runs from the T-Rex in the 3rd film, so clearly he was lying this whole time and just trying to get everyone killed. Like Ashley in Until Dawn and Ethan in Resident Evil 7, Dr. Alan Grant is the Jurassic Park franchise's first secret psycho.
He slashes at you here, or here, or maybe across the belly, spilling your intestines. The point is, you are alive when they start to eat you.
Well, maybe not so secret.
I wanna go now.
Just look how it eats.
Please.
I bet you never look at birds the same way again.
Dennis Nedry, allegedly a villain, but realistically a guy caught up in corporate espionage because of the fact that his unique talents are being exploited for nowhere near enough money, is mauled to death by a juvenile Dilophosaurus midway through his plan to get paid properly by Santa's billionaire brother over here. Whilst this of course is emblematic of why rule number 1 is so important, it's also an interesting insight into why you should never portray people in any horror scenario. Chances are they'll be the main character, and antagonists versus monsters always ends up with the antagonists becoming Monster Munch. Not like the crisps, which, by the way, god tier. But if you're bad, or if these guys think that you're bad, you get eaten. Simple as that.
Gallimimus.
I guess don't run into Rexy's mouth. There's nothing waiting for you but teeth and the strongest bite force in the history of planet Earth.
Oh, Mr. Arnold.
I guess don't be a black guy in a pre-2010 horror movie. There's nothing waiting for you but teeth and Laura Dern hugging your severed arm. Maybe if you find yourself in this situation, it would be best to... Next up, Robert Muldoon. This is the game warden guy who's all like, watch out for those raptors, before being mauled to death without even getting a shot off with that gun of his. I used to find this scene really funny as a little kid. I guess that kind of messed up reaction to horror is how I ended up doing survival guides for all you non-psychos out there. That said, perhaps I just understood from an early age that Robert Muldoon deserves every moment of agony, because he violates a key rule in the seconds leading up to his timely demise. Muldoon here forgets to remember his training, resulting in his falling prey to the very same velocitactics that he warns others to look out for. If you're going to tell people not to fall into that trap, and then you do so yourself, you are a hypocrite. So, perish. Muldoon is actually the last human to die in Jurassic Park, and the only fatalities throughout the rest of the film are the velociraptors that terrorise Ellie, Alan, and those annoying kids throughout the majority of the third act. Said raptors are Kim, Randy, and the big one, and unfortunately there's a little confusion over which is actually which, due to, well, you try telling them apart. According to the Jurassic Park wiki, Randy is the first to go after being locked in a freezer by two kids and slowly freezing to death. Jeez. Is Ellie the only person in this entire park that doesn't get someone or something brutally killed? What is this, Tim Murphy's most dangerous game? Anyway, Randy never had a mummy or daddy dinosaur, so couldn't possibly know this. But if you had a parent or guardian growing up, you might remember that you should never ever run indoors. There is ice and water everywhere, and two sadistic kids who want to create the world's first prehistoric popsicle. Unfortunately for them, they don't get to try their tasty treat, because they still have to deal with Kim, the second of the raptors in the kitchen scene. Right off the bat, my advice for Kim would be to get smart. People always go on about how raptors are so intelligent, and they do have some pretty advanced hunting tactics, as well as investing XP in their door opening skill. But Kim is clearly the dunce of the group, because, but that's not even her worst moment, because she's as dumb as a dodo and soon to become equally extinct. If you thought that the Gallimimus jumping into Rexy's jaws was bad, then you should probably look away for the next 15 seconds or so, because Kim is about to pull a classic villain move that we surely know better than by now. Stop monologuing. Now, you may be wondering, how is it possible for a velociraptor to monologue? They won't learn to speak for another 2 movies.
Alan!
Well, it is true that Kim doesn't pull out a PowerPoint to explain her dastardly schemes to our favourite Jurassic family, but she telegraphs what she's doing for far too long when she should really be taking bites out of Lex's arm. As such, she ends up empty-handed and also crushed to death by the unrivaled power of this towering behemoth. And last but not least, well, maybe least, we have the big one. Don't attack a T-Rex.
Duh.
The Lost World. Jurassic Park, The Lost World? Why did they do it like this? If you want to survive in real life, or at least keep your job, I would recommend doing away with the reverse subtitle nonsense. This is how you derail a franchise in one simple step. Anyway, it turns out that there were more dinos and they devour more people, including a couple in San Diego at the end of the film. Now, the first person to perish in Lost Park, Jurassic the World is Eddie, an engineer who tries to rescue the group from those hungry T-Rex parents and fails. Horrifically. You may notice something about the way that he's devoured, other than that it's absolutely terrifying. That's right, these guys are huge fans of 1955 animated kids film Lady and the Tramp. They're simply using Eddie as spaghetti because, as you may have noticed, T-Rex arms are too short to use a hob. I would therefore advise that you bring spaghetti, which you can offer up as a viable alternative to your life. Despite how it may seem, this sacrifice is actually worth it. Moving on, Dieter Stark dies like a fool when he tries to go to the toilet and is humiliated by So you should definitely learn to hold it in. Zombieland made this one of the key rules of surviving the apocalypse back when they copied my horror survival guide idea a full 13 years before I'd even had it. But yeah, you should never be relieving yourself if you can help it. This is why we rarely see people go to the toilet in films. It's the only way to ensure that you survive. Laurie has been holding it in for like 6 decades at this point. Donald Gennaro even tried to warn us back in the original Jurassic Park by dying on the toilet, but I guess Spielberg really wanted to make sure that we were aware. Shortly afterwards, Burke dies perhaps the dumbest death of the Park films when, upon seeing that there's a snake on him, he decides not to just pick it up and put it somewhere else, but to dive headfirst into the mouth of the Tyrannosaurus that they've all been running away from. This is because he's been taking advice from Peep Show character Superhands regarding the venomous nature of legless reptilians. I don't even know if there's a rule here. I would hope that none of you would be silly enough to do this, but I have to say something, so I guess it's got to be like snakes. They're cool, and they're your friends, at least compared to the giant murder lizard who's trying to feast on your face. Next, the survivors do manage to get away from the big beasties, but unfortunately this means that they wind up in the tall grass, where, looking to avoid yet another terrible Stephen King adaptation, many give up their lives in the hope that someone in heaven has made a good version of Pet Sematary. So for this particular scene, some would definitely say, "Don't go into the long grass!" But watching Primal has taught me that that's actually a great way of avoiding predators, especially velociraptors. So instead, let's take a step back and examine what's really happening here. Spielberg is thinning out the group by killing off the cannon fodder, so perhaps don't be expendable and you might actually be spared. But how? Well, Spielberg values nothing more than a child's perspective, so I would strongly recommend having kids, or at least finding some to adopt mid-catastrophe, a la Alan and Ellie replacing Tim and Lex's parents, or Ian Malcolm becoming immortal when it turned out he had a kid. Or the parents in Jurassic Park 3 surviving against all odds despite being the least competent people in all of history. Or in Jurassic World when... wait, that's for the next video. But if you have kids in some capacity, particularly if you're a classic hetero white couple with determination to save the family, you're basically set to survive. The next death is truly tragic, as this poor raptor is brutally impaled by the film's greatest monster, Malcolm's daughter, Kelly. She does some weird acrobatics and kicks an S-tier dino through the window, killing it for the simple crime of being hungry. After feigning innocence this whole time, Kelly turns into the Terminator and enacts another extinction event on our prehistoric pal, and we're forced to watch as he slowly bleeds to death at the hands, or rather, feet, of Secret Psycho number 2. For the raptor, my advice would be to kill Kelly as early as possible, so that she's not there to do this to you later on. You've got to preempt this stuff, and you've got to prioritise. To the crew of the SS Venture, I would offer the same advice as I do to the woman who encountered Dennis Reynolds. Never board a vessel with a dangerous predator.
Because of the implication.
And dog, stop being such a whiny little fool. If you're too selfish to share some pool water, you can't complain when things go south, especially if your bark loses out to their bite. And this dude, learn from the Gallimimus. The whole concept of safety in numbers dictates that you probably shouldn't split off from the group. And if you must, choose a door that's unlocked, or be ready to break the glass in case of emergency. This guy's credited as an anonymous unlucky man, but he makes enough mistakes that I don't mind placing the blame at his feet, which by the way are currently dissolving in a pool of a T-Rex's stomach acid. And finally, Ludlow. I would strongly suggest that you don't chase after a T-Rex infant when the parent is nearby. It's like getting between a bear and its cub. Except, instead of being a hulking abomination that can take your head off in one swoop, this thing is much, much scarier than that. Ludlow's death also falls under the categories of get smart and don't be the villain, but they've more or less been covered already. That said, there's also an important lesson here regarding what Ludlow represents, not just as a villain, but as a rich man. Notice how those T-Rexes shared Eddie's body earlier? Well, that's because T-Rexes are notorious Marxists. They took eat the rich particularly literally, and they'll stop at nothing in their quest to impose their system of economic equality. The currency is human flesh, which is why this T-Rex is actually making it rain when it kills Burke. So if you're ever faced with a Tyrannosaur and you don't have the option to offer up some spaghetti, either tell it that you're poor or give it all the money you own, because you can buy a lot of human flesh when you're a billionaire. Next up, Jurassic Park 3, the second best film in the franchise and my favourite when I was like 6. I don't care about reviews or scientific inaccuracies, the Spino is as cool as a cucumber submerged in liquid nitrogen and given a set of razor-sharp teeth, and that includes this frankly impossible fight for sure. The raptors and wing boys are also pretty terrifying at times, and 2 of the series' most brutal deaths occur in 3, which at times looks like it's set on Skull Island rather than Isla Sorna. The plot is basically that some rich kid gets stranded on Dino Island and his parents bring a team, including Jurassic Park veteran Dr. Alan Grant, to rescue him. Things ultimately go south, which you should probably be getting used to by now, but Alan and the family survive, so no big deal really. What doesn't survive is the series, and also these 2 guys on the boat in the film's opening. It's hard to know exactly what happened to them thanks to this rather convenient cloud, but I like to think that they became Spinosaurus brunch after the towering theropod unlocked the power of dry ice. Whatever the weather, you probably shouldn't take people on tours of an island full of people eaters, especially when those people are children, with families, whose rescue would benefit some sort of narrative drive. This is especially true if you plan on utilising an admittedly quality pun on your parachute, because no matter the viability, the gods will be furious, and everyone involved will die. Once the parents eventually realised that the son they let go of some random guy to kill a lizard island off the coast of Costa Rica is missing, they decide that they should probably do something about that, and bring our friend Alan along for the sake of movie marketability. Unfortunately, by the time they arrive, the man who was looking after the child has perished. Although again, it's difficult to tell how exactly. This is particularly frustrating for the sake of a survival guide, and almost feels like it was done with the sole intention of spiting me. Thanks a bunch, Joe Johnston, director of... Wait, what? This guy's filmography is wild. How does the same person direct Jumanji, Captain America, The Wolfman, The Nutcracker Movie, Jurassic Park 3, Honey I Shrunk the Kids, and, get this, Indiana Jones 6 Spring Break Adventure? What is happening? Anyway, we are once again going to highlight how ridiculous it is that these guys would go to Isla Sorna after everything that's happened there. A T-Rex ate some dudes in San Diego, for Pete's sake. Like, I get it if your son is there and needs you to go and save him, but he never should have been in the first place. That said, it's kind of boring to me to keep reminding you that most characters in horror scenarios should never have shown up there to begin with, so we're not going to do that just yet. And instead, we'll note that as soon as this guy has steered himself and little Eric to safety, he mysteriously dies, and yet the boy was okay, even thriving on the island that allegedly claimed this man's life.
Coincidence? I think not!
I put it to you that Eric murdered this man, strung him up in a tree to jump scare his mum, knowing that the corpse was once her boyfriend, and quite possibly ate his heart to gain his strength. So firstly, Secret Psycho number 3 is of course Eric, but I would also suggest that you don't date someone's mum, because the family will reunite, and it will be over your dead body. And like Eric's murder of Parachute Man, the Kirby family will sap the life out of several other creatures on Site B. The first to go is Cooper, in a pretty horrific moment after he realises just how big of a mistake he's made in agreeing to come to the island. Wounded and running from an unknown creature, Cooper is the last to get back to the plane after its initial landing, which means that he's not on board when they decide that they need to take off. It's like showing up at the airport 5 minutes before your flight. You're just not going to make it in time, and you'll probably be eaten by a Spinosaurus. Thus, our first rule is punctuality. Adhere to this one concept and the whole operation will go a lot more smoothly. But unfortunately for all you non-Coopers out there, there's always one who lets the group down, and as such, the plane can't take off properly, and ends up taking a chunk out of the largest land predator to ever exist, sending it on the warpath as it seeks revenge upon those that hurt it so. Live or die, things will not go well for you from here on out. Unless, of course, you're Eric Kirby, who is just thriving on all of these deaths. Speaking of, MB Nash. Must I reiterate? Parasaurolophus. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and I cannot be bothered to look it up. Have a catchier name. T-Rex, Spinosaurus, even Velociraptor. All of these names have less than 6 syllables, which in the dinosaur kingdom makes them impossibly short. Try getting a 6-year-old to spell Parasaurolophus and you'll realise why they're not T-Rex tier. And what's the best way to survive the Jurassic Park franchise? Popularity. Be a fan favourite and you can't be killed. So these guys never had a chance, hence dying before we even saw it. And its killer, this T-Rex, is about to meet its match. Maybe forget what I said about popularity for the next 30 seconds, because after abandoning its meal, it chases the remaining humans through the forest, and that's when ye old fan favourite comes face to face with the film's big bad. And if you want to know which of these two comes out on top, I mean, it's on the logo. This moment is perhaps the most controversial amongst Jurassic Park fans, but I don't care. It's cool, and I like it like that. What I don't like is food waste, and neither does El Spino, who swiftly punishes the Tyrannosaur for its gluttony. Big fan of 7, this guy. And the final human of the original trilogy to get absolutely murked is Udesky, who becomes part of a trap laid by the island's raptors when they paralyze him, letting his cries ring out to try and coax the other humans out of hiding. This is the one death that properly scared me as a kid, because it's so slow and horrific, and the raptors in this film are just awesome. Unfortunately, Udesky's original sin is ignoring the advice of horror survival entrepreneur Dr. Alan Grant, who specifically tells them to try safety in numbers immediately before Udesky isolates himself in a forest full of foes. You see, Grant has learned the error of his psycho ways by the end of the 3rd film, and the tips that he's throwing out now are actually quite good solid advice. So, listen to the experts, folks, and you might actually survive your trip to Jurassic Park. Oh, and I almost forgot this pteranodon. I guess, like, heed the weight limit warnings in lifts. No more than 3 people at any one time. Honestly. Seriously though, don't go to a dino-infested island. Ever. It will never end well for you. But we'll hear more about that in the Jurassic World Survival Guide, which hopefully won't take as long as this one, but you never know. In the meantime, if you had any suggestions for other videos, or perhaps rules of your own that might help your fellow folks to avoid ending up devoured, digested, and dropped in
One big pile of shit.
Nope! I have kept this video about as wholesome as possible, and I would like to keep it that way. Look at me, making somewhat family-friendly content.
Huh? Who would have thought? Not me.
So finally, thank you so much for watching, and if you like this video, please consider giving it a like, or maybe even checking out my channel for more of the same, and in the meantime, I will see you next time.